Even today, so many decades after it was made, Slapshot remains the preeminent, quintessential hockey movie, the one the real fans come back to whenever they need reminding as to how and why they fell in love with this fast-moving, hard-hitting, dramatic sport in the first place. There are several reasons for this, that is, things which go beyond Paul Newman's charismatic portrait of minor league veteran Reggie Dunlop, the quirky ensemble cast that is the Charlestown Chiefs, and Nancy Dowd's hilarious script. Slapshot is an iconic film which captures what makes hockey compelling to both play and watch. The locker room scenes and the general atmosphere on the bench and the relationships between the players serves to recreate a moment in time in tremendously accurate detail. You can almost smell the hot dogs and liniment. In this video, I wanted to break down the things which I think director George Roy Hill and writer Nancy Dowd got right in Slapshot. The film's success is twofold. First, it captures the violence that is so much a part of the sport. Second, it encapsulates the danger that is baked into the cake, so to speak. Hockey is, first and foremost, a punishing physical contest. Speed plus traumatic collisions means that even great players often have careers shortened by injury. Players have to possess enormous stamina. They are expected to endure all the indignities which happen in the course of the game. The violence is anticipated by the fans, tolerated by coaches and officials, and worn as a badge of honor by the players.
Damn lard-ass Barkley Donaldson. I'm telling you, he jumped us.
Sure did. Yeah.
But Dave was there.
Dave's a killer! Yeah! Dave's a killer!
Okay, but Dave's out. Who's going to take his place?
The danger of violence means that setting foot on the ice, which is itself a rather unyielding, unrelenting setting in any event, takes great courage. Body checks, frozen pucks traveling at high speed, unforgiving boards, sharpened skate blades, occasional fistfights, and hockey sticks that can impale or lacerate. All of this is par for the course, the occupational hazards of a life in pro hockey. Even today, with the best equipment, helmets, and face shields, concussions remain inevitable. It is a given that the players must be tough. In an early scene in Slapshot, it is easy to understand Jim Carr's, Andrew Duncan's, confusion as to why Dave Carlson, Jerry Hauser, is sitting out the Chiefs game against the Presidents.
You injured your knee in the Peterborough game.
No.
No, I thought you had.
No, I have a cold. You know, the runny nose and the sore throat, all that.
Because of the number of games in a season, there is also a certain pressure to play injured. We see this because Reggie always seems to be nursing another injury. Part of the violence of hockey has to do with the incredible speed with which the game is commonly played. The pace is breakneck. Even the title of the film is about velocity. To the fans, hockey is oftentimes a blur of activity and hitting and energy and speed most of all. Look away and you'll miss a lot, or perhaps get a puck in the mouth for your trouble. In January 2022, one of the Oilers' current stars, Leon Draisaitl, had a testy, terse exchange with veteran hockey reporter Jim Matheson. Here is a bit of that.
Is there one thing that you, in your own mind, you're saying, we got to get better at that?
Yeah, we have to get better at everything.
Would you like to expand on that?
No. You can do that. You know everything.
Why are you so pissy, Leon? Why are you so pissy?
I'm not. I'm just answering your
question. Yeah, you are. Whenever I ask you a question.
I gave you an answer.
Not very good one.
Okay.
It reminded me slightly of how the Hanson brothers seemed determined to keep their distance from Dickie Dunn regardless of how he might lionize them in print.
Hey guys, this is Dickie Dunn. He wrote the article on you in the paper.
Hi guys, nice to meet you. I was trying to capture the spirit of the thing.
It seems as though the boys are concerned about the day when things aren't going so swimmingly, when they are not the toast of Charlestown, and what Dickie Dunn might write about them at that point. In hockey, there seems to be a tradition of healthy distrust of the intentions of the print reporters, though not so television and radio people. The exchange with Draisaitl is revealing. It shows the extraordinary divide between those who are trying their best to win championships, albeit to no avail, and those who are paid to write about that self-same struggle. In the end, they are at cross purposes, and it's not pretty. In the exchange at the press conference, Matheson appeared to want Draisaitl to place the blame for the Oilers' woes, at that moment anyway, squarely on the shoulders of the team's inconsistent, long-suffering goalie, which might have divided the Oiler dressing room. It was an extraordinary moment when, despite the best-laid plans, all designed to prevent such a thing ever occurring, reality somehow found its way into the Oiler press conference. Matheson may have found Draisaitl's answer to be pissy or whiny, and it is his duty to opine on that if he so wishes, but neither should he be dictating the answers a player may choose to give. That is not his role during the press conference. It is his role, though, to write about and speculate about what Draisaitl's evasiveness might possibly mean. In some ways, Draisaitl was doing the beat writer a favor, giving Matheson something to write about, since avoiding answering a question is oftentimes an answer, albeit of another kind, just as not returning a phone message is sending another kind of message in return, like, you don't matter, I don't care about you, or just go away and stop bothering me. Hockey players, especially after the 8-game 1972 Summit Series with the Soviet Union, trust television. In this interview, Phil Esposito would talk over and around the print media to show with torrents of sweat pouring off him, as if to say, look how hard we're working to protect the country's honor. The Team Canada was trying its level best to win and was playing a Soviet team that was formidable and would be tough to beat. In the Vancouver game, in the Pacific Coliseum on September 8, 1972, fickle fans had booed Canada, and Espo wanted people to understand that this series wasn't over yet.
I'm really disappointed. I am completely disappointed. I cannot believe it.
This refreshingly honest interview with famed sports broadcaster Johnny Esau serves as a kind of template for Slapshot. We get a vibe of ordinary good old boys just trying their level best to win for the fans and for one another.
We came because we love Canada. I don't think it's fair that we should be booed.
Well, Phil, I'm sure that the people can see from the sweat just pouring off your face that you and all your players have given 100%, and we look forward to some great games from you and the rest of your gang when you get over to Moscow, and we can wish you the very best of luck.
John,
keep working hard.
We're going to get better. I know.
Attaboy. Thank you very much, Phil.
Talking directly to the fans, without an interlocutor like Dickie Dunn, seems to work best.
I'd like the folks to come down and just watch us cream them punks from Syracuse.
It will always come down to the electronic media, people like Jim Carr, versus print media writers like Dickie Dunn, M. Emmett Walsh. Which one will give you a better shake? Well, the Hansons make no secret of what they think. They're with Draisaitl. In Slapshot, netminders are portrayed as just a little bit off-center. Part of the team, yes, but also very much in their own headspace.
For spear, you know, like that. All bad.
During a Chiefs game against Long Island, for example, Reggie's incessant chirping about Ducks goalie Tommy Hanrahan's wife, Suzanne, Melinda Dillon, is sufficient to induce Hanrahan, played by Christopher Murney, to leave his crease unattended to fight Reggie. Reggie guesses that Hanrahan is so preoccupied by his own personal problems and failed marriage that he'll be easily distracted. As a result, Charlestown wins the game. For his part, the Chiefs' starting netminder, Denis Lemieux, played by Yvon Barrette, is similarly volatile. Here he discloses how he feels about playing for Charlestown.
I don't care who owns the Chiefs. I hate it here. Make me sick. My allergy. Puke every time. Blah, like that.
As a veteran, Reggie knows how to put it all into perspective, telling Denis,
You're a goalie. You're supposed to be like that.
Somebody owned the Chiefs. We go to Florida and I get the money.
Reggie would surely know. Goalies, like Hall of Famer Glenn Hall, were always men apart. Hall nearly as famous for throwing up prior to games as he was for his 407 wins and being chosen a first-team All-Star 7 times. Similarly, Montreal's legendary goalie Patrick Roy was known to talk to his goalposts from time to time. After coach Tremblay unwisely left Roy in a game for too long against Detroit, the goalie informed President Ronald Corey, with the game in progress, that he was through as a Canadien. It's hard to imagine another player except a goalie resigning in this particularly unusual manner.
Now, wait a minute. Ned, what's this sort of meaning?
Trade me right fucking now.
Trade me right fucking now.
In some ways, that old characterization of a netminder still stands. He's a man in a funny mask who is paid to stand in front of a small chunk of frozen vulcanized rubber projected towards him at 85 miles an hour. It takes a certain kind of person to want to do this as a vocation. As the great Jacques Plante famously put it, how would you like a job where when you make a mistake, a red light goes on and 18,000 people boo you? One sympathizes with Denis' reaction to all this.
My allergy to those fucking fans, you know, has returned.
When Jeff Hansen is hit in the face by a set of keys after scoring a goal, it struck me, pun intended, that Slapshot creator Nancy Dowd is probably onto something. More than in most other professional sports, hockey fans seem more prone to throwing objects onto the playing surface. Certainly this is true of team jerseys if a team is playing poorly. In some ways, less violent versions of this propensity to throw objects is a part of the tradition of the game. Hat tricks, for example, are still acknowledged by launching one's own hat onto the ice surface. In Detroit, during the playoffs, it's common for fans to throw octopuses onto the ice. This tradition seems linked to the fact that octopuses have 8 arms, the number of playoff victories that used to be necessary to win the Stanley Cup before expansion. Of course, every franchise has its own traditions, so at Panthers games, they throw rubber rats onto the ice, and in Hershey, they prefer throwing teddy bears. One of the many things that Nancy Dowd is sending up in Slapshot is the nature of hockey ownership generally. Before Reggie can even find out the identity of the Chiefs' owner, which he does by blackmailing Joe McGrath, Anita McCambridge, played by Catherine Walker, has made up her mind. The team's greatest value is as a tax write-off, so she is determined to fold the team, not sell it to another community. Despite how hard Reggie has worked to turn the team into a winner, she is determined not to save it. The players and the fans mean nothing to her. She lacks any connection to her team. The history of the NHL is replete with bad owners who would trade a once-in-a-generation talent for a wad of cash to support their failing business ventures. Bad hockey owners have tended to be greedy, petty, and short-sighted. Like Anita McCambridge, they care little about anything, even their own reputations. Eventually, the Oilers as good as sold Gretzky to Los Angeles. Ironically, the buyer, charismatic Kings owner at that time, Bruce McNall, eventually ended up in prison because of his illegal business practices. Of course, bad management is also part of Nancy Dowd's critique, and Joe McGrath is an exemplar of someone who has no real plan beyond being a tightwad at the behest of management, looking for deals but not willing to give up much in return.
Boy, every piece of garbage that comes in the market, you gotta buy it.
That Reggie turns the team around is kind of a fluke. He does it despite McGrath. Again, the Oilers may be instructive here to illustrate that Nancy Dowd really did capture the essence of the thing, as Dickie Dunn might say. Edmonton once employed a general manager, Peter Chiarelli, who was permitted by upper management to sign a questionable contract of questionable length with a goalie no other team in the league was much interested in, the netminder mentioned earlier. This signing occurred with less than 24 hours remaining in Chiarelli's own tenure in Edmonton. The deal would haunt the Oilers for some time afterward, including in that earlier exchange between Draisaitl and Matheson. Only one day after the signing, Chiarelli was fired, following a loss to the Detroit Red Wings. Though the deal was short-sighted, it ultimately reflected on upper management as well, since the Brain Trust must have known, one day before his firing, that Chiarelli was on his way. What was the point of allowing him to make one last terrible deal? Of course, even more disturbing, it also implies that Chiarelli might not have been fired if the Oilers had beaten Detroit. This story is so crazy and unprofessional that it probably would have been rejected as implausible if Nancy Dowd had tried to include this bizarre vignette in her script. Once again, it's hard for hockey fiction to trump hockey reality. Only 3 minutes into the film, we hear the national anthem being played on the organ, and then the organist himself is revealed. After Ned Braden, played by Michael Ontkean, scores a goal for the Chiefs, we hear the organ being played once again. Throughout the film, the organ is frequently heard whenever players are on the ice. And sometimes when Jim Carr is broadcasting the game.
$100 bounty on the head of famed Syracuse stickman Tim McCracken. McCracken, also known as Dr. Hook, for his scalpel-like prowess with the stick.
In Slapshot, the organist was played by a musician named Rod Masters, and his music is virtually inescapable in the film. Incidentally, in a case of life imitating art, Rod Masters is now the organist for the Seattle Kraken franchise in the NHL, so it appears as though at least one member of the Chiefs finally made it to the big time. Reggie's admonition to the organist regarding Lady of Spain notwithstanding,
Don't ever play Lady of Spain again!
the message of Slapshot is that it wouldn't exactly be a hockey game without some organ music for the fans to enjoy. This tradition of organ music and hockey began in 1929 in Chicago and continues on to this day. In 2011, an MA student at Carleton University actually wrote a dissertation about the history of the hockey organ and its role in what he termed the performance practice traditions of the sport. One of the more peculiar incidents in Slapshot is the pre-game brawl.
And there's no one to stop it because there are no officials on the ice.
This particular scene in Slapshot was inspired by an incident in the North American Hockey League from 1 year before, during the 1975-76 season, in which the Buffalo Norsemen were playing the Johnstown Jets and a fight erupted before the game began. The fight was triggered by a racist incident in a previous game in which several Norsemen fans had held up derogatory signs and hurled insults at an African-American player on the Jets. If you look closely at the pictures of the Jets players, you will note that a number of them have non-speaking roles in Slapshot. The incident in the film does not involve race, but is mostly about the Hansons not being willing to wait for the game to start in order to mix it up with the Peterborough Patriots. 10 years after Slapshot, the Canadiens and Flyers had a pre-game brawl that many people still remember because the incident was captured on video. As part of a pre-game ritual, the Montreal players like to shoot the puck into the opponent's net. Philadelphia took exception to this, the gloves came off, and the fights began. This brawl, and others like it, were the reason that new rules were instituted to try to curtail bench-clearing brawls in the NHL. Individual fights still occur, of course, but ones involving the entire team are much rarer. Of course, there are consequences to the curtailment of direct violence. There are still a lot of cheap shots and concussions and serious injuries in the game. The ice surface remains a dangerous place. Now, this had already occurred a number of times prior to Slapshot, so the scene with Ned Braden in his jockstrap and skates was more designed to represent something that had already occurred. In the spring of 1974, there were 3 streaking incidents in the NHL, one in Los Angeles, one in Oakland at a Golden Seals game, and one at a Canucks game. What is curious about the incidents, especially the one in Los Angeles, was that the news media reported the incident as though it was a news story. In actual fact, the streakers in California were clearly paid promotions by the teams themselves, rather than spontaneously occurring incidents. Then Kings owner Jack Kent Cooke wanted a stunt during a game that would create a buzz. Later, Charlie Findlay orchestrated a similar incident to generate interest in the Seals. Back then, the NHL did not discipline either team. At that moment, getting publicity for the sport in California took precedence. Plus, I gather that everyone was streaking in 1974. It is worth noting that of all the professional sports, hockey seems by far the most unwelcoming for streaking. It is an ice surface after all, and falling down could be both chilling and painful and particularly ungraceful. In case you were wondering, the streakers brought some luck with them though, since the home teams went 2-1, with only the Seals losing their match to the then Atlanta Flames. Throughout Slapshot, we see Billy Charlevoix, a sort of Ron Duguay pretty boy player, portrayed by Guido Tennessee, who was a real-life member of the Johnstown Jets, frequently looking at himself in the mirror. Some have called it Billy Charlevoix checking out Billy Charlevoix. Undoubtedly his second favorite thing to gaze upon, however, is probably the Sparkle Twins, Janet Arturs Duckworth and Louise Arturs. The Sparkle Twins, as originally conceived, were supposed to be young high school girls with braces, but upon meeting Janet and Louise, director George Roy Hill apparently decided to go a very different direction. The Sparkle Twins and their matching t-shirts are on screen an extraordinary number of times in the course of the film. They seem to represent groupies or puck bunnies who are so much a part of pro sports and who simply become an accepted addendum to the team itself. I couldn't help wondering if this unusual photo during an NHL playoff game was an homage to Slapshot. Devoted groupies were once an accepted part of hockey back in the 70s, though today players are doubtlessly more circumspect and afraid of how this might make them look on social media and elsewhere. Still, one wonders if it has been entirely relegated to the past, since the temptation for younger players just entering the league might be too much to resist. It's hard to say whether this is still apropos today, but players used to spend a good deal of their time in the old days finding ways to entertain themselves until the next game.
Well, we're on the road. We're all set to go. Tell us when.
There is a scene in a local establishment where we see the Chiefs players watching and discussing a soap opera on television. NHL players seem to really like these shows, and Gretzky famously made a brief appearance on The Young and the Restless in 1981.
This is Wayne, out of our Edmonton operation. Sure could use some of your class around home.
Are you just visiting, Mr.?
Call me Wayne. Everybody does.
Other members of the Chiefs, seemed to prefer watching and wagering on what contestants might say next on game shows.
Is there anyone you would like to say hello to back home, Larry?
$10 he says all the guys at work.
$10 he says wife and kids.
I like to say hi to all the guys down at work if I can.
All right.
Terrific.
On one occasion, we see that Reggie is reading the hockey news. There are also a couple of scenes of Reggie and his pals playing cards, usually on the team bus. It seems likely that the availability of far better programming, including streaming services, has rendered some of this obsolete, though soap operas were definitely what players were watching 40 years ago.
We always watched General Hospital soap operas. We're big on those. Really? those are big in professional sports. We watch that.
Since hockey games were usually played at night, the players were free to do as they wished in the afternoon when the soaps were broadcast. One of the central tenets of Nancy Dowd's script is that the Chiefs would be worth something if the team started winning and could then be sold to an owner in a more prosperous city than Charlestown. Not that common of late, the NHL has a long history of relocating franchises. For example, over the years, 2 teams have failed in Atlanta, the Flames and the Thrashers, which were then relocated to Calgary and Winnipeg respectively. The original Winnipeg Jets team from the WHA now plays in Arizona. It still seems odd that a city like Atlanta gets 2 shots at a franchise, neither of which succeeded, whereas cities like Houston remain without an NHL team to this day. There always seemed to be a certain randomness to the places which were awarded franchises. At this time in the 1970s, the World Hockey Association, a rival league to the NHL, also used to occasionally fold teams or relocate teams in the middle of the season. Just to take one example, during the 1974-75 season, the Los Angeles Sharks relocated to Detroit as the Michigan Stags, and then relocated again to Baltimore as the Baltimore Blades. In comparison, Charlestown is surprisingly stable. At least they finished their season in Charlestown. At that moment, it was kind of a free-for-all, so much so that an anonymous buyer for the Chiefs, who would then move them to Florida, was entirely plausible. Reggie would know all of this, so he took a chance that his lie about a southern businessman purchasing the Chiefs would not necessarily come off as implausible.
See, they're getting a bunch of old geezers down there from the Northeast. And what do you think those old geezers really miss in Florida? Hockey. Their own team, a Saturday night game.
One area that the script really nails is the character of the players on the team. Nearly to a man, despite being from diverse backgrounds, they seem like good-natured people. In public, the players tend to behave as gentlemen and put the interests of the team above their own interests. They are salt-of-the-earth types who would definitely help someone if they knew they were in distress. In my life, living in a rural area, I found that hockey players, as a general rule, were a lot less like Ned Braden and a lot more like the Hansons, more down-to-earth, more approachable, and more friendly. By and large, the players were funny, plain-spoken, easygoing, and charitable with their time. They knew the fans were important to the future of the sport, and so they always treated us with respect and were happy to shake hands and socialize. They loved having a good time, but they were always respectful and never out of control or violent. The Hansons are an interesting case in point. Though Reggie is initially convinced that there is something wrong with them, the Hansons are nevertheless respectful of Reggie's veteran status. They do not care that they are not immediately popular when they first arrive in Charlestown. They know that the nature of a hockey team is that they will eventually be welcomed aboard. In short order, their teammates will see that they are unswervingly loyal and that deep down, they are really sweethearts who are devoted to the team, their coach, and the fans. They know that the members of a hockey team will inevitably become like family members. They will be accepted, warts and all. There's something kind of beautiful about that, which Nancy Dowd's script is able to capture. In Slapshot, one of the more memorable scenes involves the Hanson brothers going into the stands in Hyannisport to try and find the man who threw a set of keys at Jeff. This was yet another scene that owes much to the Johnstown Jets, and an incident in which an opposition fan hit Jeff Carlson, the hockey player who portrays Jeff Hansen in the film, with a cup of ice cubes. In the movie, after being hit with the keychain, the Hansons decide to punish the culprit. Of course, they aren't entirely sure what he looks like, so it creates a bit of a problem. An incident quite similar to this occurred in 1979 in Madison Square Garden, when a number of Bruins players climbed into the stands after their teammate Stan Jonathan, was punched by a Rangers fan who reached over the glass. Though there weren't legal consequences in the case of the Madison Square Garden incident, because everyone involved declined to press charges, there were some suspensions and fines levied by the league to punish the players for assaulting the fans. In Slapshot, of course, the Hansons are arrested by the local police.
Hey, fellas, there's 6 of them out there for us.
Once Charlestown starts winning, after adopting a much rougher style of play, there is a concomitant increase in people's support of the team. In small-town America, people still support and identify with their local hockey franchise. With little else to do, the local team becomes a part of people's lives. Watching how the fans come to love the Hansons and how much they respect Reggie and how invested they are in the team's success is heartening. I can vouch that small towns are really like this. We used to turn out on Friday nights and we really cared about the outcome of the game. Again, Slapshot gets this about right. When your local team is winning, everything is right with the world. It seemingly cures all ills. Charlestown, to be sure, will be a much less interesting town without Reggie Dunlop and his pals. When you support a winning team, some of that swagger can't help but rub off on you. Reggie's winning attitude transformed the team and the town as well. He and the boys will be missed, no doubt about it. The team's deference to Reggie is not entirely based on his charisma and leadership alone. It is something more, and it's related to how hockey players tend to revere their coaches. In so many ways, the coach is the heart of the team. His vision becomes the team's vision. The coach is the focal point. Players must fit into his system, which is the basis of how a team succeeds or fails.
I owe all that I am to our coach, Reg Dunlop. He's had the greatest influence on me.
Whether deserved or not, this sort of testimonial is not uncommon. Part psychiatrist, part babysitter, Reggie is a motivator. He leads by example and eventually gets the team, with the exception of Braden of course, to believe in the new, more aggressive approach to the game. He encourages and cajoles, and the team begins to respond. He is the unquestioned and unchallenged leader of the team. The players seem to understand what Reggie is attempting to do.
Coach, you nailed him right in the fucking head. You nailed him right in his mind. Besides, you deserved it. Yeah.
Ultimately, they will do whatever he asks, even if they do not totally understand what exactly that is.
Did Clapper, Eddie Shore, those guys were the greats.
Reg is our coach. Yeah, sure, old-time hockey. Like Eddie Shore. Yeah.
Hockey coaches tend to be men the players can depend upon and trust. Reggie fits the bill. He is a veteran who commands respect.
It's their rink, it's their ice, and it's their fucking town. But tonight we got our fans with us. They spent their own dough to get here, and they came here to see us.
His vision of a tougher, meaner, tighter checking team soon becomes their vision. This is what coaching is. The players trust Reggie's leadership, and they appreciate that he is able to create a new, winning atmosphere in the locker room. Reggie expects a lot, but the team rises to the occasion, physically dominating their opponents. As their confidence grows, a new tradition emerges in Charlestown: winning. To achieve this, a coach needs to lead, and throughout this film that's exactly what Reggie does: inspire his players. It's yet another detail about hockey that Slapshot manages to accurately represent. Thank you for watching and for your interest in this channel. Your positive feedback and encouragement about the first Slapshot video was appreciated, and your continuing interest in this channel is truly heartening. You might wish to consider subscribing if you enjoyed this work. As always, I hope you will return to watch other videos.
3 of you guys, you pull one thing, you're out of this game. Now I run a clean game here. I have any trouble, I'll suspend you. I'm listening to a fucking song!
I have one more for you. Leon, you show your frustration on the ice last game against Ottawa. Is that a good thing when you show it so the other team knows you're frustrated?
Yeah, it's a great thing, for sure.
Jesus Christ, what a fucking nightmare.